Sleeping Beauty. Once upon a time, a long time ago, there was a beautiful and peaceful kingdom, ruled by a king and a queen. But there was one thing that made the king and queen very sad. It was that they couldn't have children. The king and queen couldn't eat or sleep well because of that. One day, the queen was enjoying the view with the king in the garden. The queen said to the king with sadness, God has given us so many privileges in this life. Now all I want is that we have a child. The moment the queen said it, a green frog jumped up from the pond. The frog said,
"The queen's wish will come true. You will give birth to a princess when spring comes."
The frog said it, then disappeared right after. The king and queen were very happy to hear it. "Oh, is that true?" Time flied. Spring finally came. As was foretold, the queen gave birth to a beautiful princess. She was a very cute and beautiful little princess. The king gazed at the newborn princess with a happy smile.
"Oh, my little princess, I'll name you Rose."
Then he excitedly gave an order.
"Men, prepare for a great feast. The whole castle will celebrate the birth of the princess."
The servants were excited too. They took the order.
"Yes, Your Majesty."
Soon the whole castle was brilliantly decorated. There was music everywhere. So the great feast dedicated to the princess began. The pretty fairies were invited. They stood beside the little princess's gilded cradle. They took turns to give her their blessings. The first one was the blue fairy. She drew a magic wand and waved it in front of the princess. Then she gently spoke. "Little princess, I grant you good health." Then the pink fairy came forth. "I grant you incomparable beauty that everyone loves." The other fairies gave the princess their blessing too. "I grant you virtues and wealth." Everyone was happy for the princess, until the 12th fairy, the last fairy, came close to the cradle. She gave her blessing. The 12th fairy couldn't finish her blessing. A cloud of black smoke suddenly showed up. The smoke started to fade and revealed the 13th fairy. Her presence frightened everyone there. The 13th fairy wore black costume and has an evil face. She walked around the cradle. She spoke with a husky voice.
You were all contemptuous of me. You didn't even invite me to this feast. I will make you pay for this."
The queen was very nervous. She looked at the king. They didn't know what to do. The 13th fairy came close to the cradle. She said,
"Listen to my curse. When her 15th birthday comes, Princess Rose will prick her finger on the spindle of a spinning wheel and die."
The wicked curse of the dark fairy shocked everyone. The queen hugged the king and trembled. The dark fairy laughed, then disappeared in a puff of smoke. Only when the dark fairy was gone, the king and queen felt relieved. They ran to the princess. The king and queen cried, "No, my child!"
"You cannot die."
The 12th fairy then went to the princess. She calmly spoke. "My king and queen, please don't worry. I cannot break that evil curse, but I can reduce it a little bit." Then she drew her magic wand and pointed it to the princess. Princess Rose will not die. Instead, she will fall into a deep sleep of 100 years. The 12th fairy reduced the curse of the dark fairy. After the blessing ceremony, the princess grew up in the protection and love of the king and queen. The king and queen were very happy every time they saw her having fun. One day, the king spoke to the queen proudly.
Our daughter is getting smarter and more beautiful as she grows. Just like the blessings of the fairies.
But the queen couldn't help but worry for the future of the princess. But I am still worried when her 15th birthday comes. Though the king was worried too, he still comforted the queen.
Don't you worry. I have given the order to confiscate every spinning wheel in the kingdom to protect our princess.
Time flew. The day the princess reached the age of 15 was near. The princess was smarter and more beautiful than ever. Then the unfortunate finally came. On a sunny day, Princess Rose was strolling in the castle. She saw a very beautiful butterfly. She was very excited and came close to it. She was about to touch the butterfly. The butterfly suddenly flew away. The princess refused to give up. She ran after it. She was determined to catch that beautiful butterfly. The butterfly led the princess to the trees behind the castle without her realizing it. Then it kept leading the princess into a big cave. The princess was too focused on it that she followed it into the cave. Suddenly, the princess saw an old woman working by her spinning wheel. She was very surprised. She approached the woman and asked, "Lady, what are you doing?" The lady's face was full of wrinkles. Not a single change on her face. She looked up and answered,
I am spinning thread, young lady.
The princess curiously came closer. Wow, spinning thread? I have never seen that before. Will you let me try it? The old woman smiled an evil smile and answered,
Of course, my dear.
The princess took the needle and she sewed up the first stitch. Suddenly, the needle pierced her hand and made her bleed. The princess startled. Ouch! After being pierced by the needle, she realized that she was in danger. She intended to stand up, but she felt dizzy. Then she laid on a bed near it. So the princess fell into a deep slumber. The whole city was suddenly covered by dark clouds. Everything, including humans and animals, were cursed. They became motionless, like they were in a deep sleep. The bushes of roses with sharp thorns grew rapidly and covered the whole castle. They became a big forest. They grew so big that the forest was full of thorns. Time passed. Nobody heard of the princess and the sleeping castle anymore, until one day a prince passed by the castle and heard a story from an old man.
It happened long ago. I heard it from my elders. The whole castle and the beautiful Princess Rose has been in their slumber for nearly 1,000 years.
After hearing that story about a sleeping princess in the castle, the prince thought,
I must get in there and save her at any cost.
Seeing the prince with determination to barge into the castle full of thorns, the soldier beside him worried.
Your Highness, it's dangerous. Many people died trying to get in there.
Ignoring all warnings, the prince made up his mind.
I must save her.
The prince walked to the bushes of thorns. He slashed the bushes with his sword. Strangely, as the blade touched the thorns, they immediately splitted both sides and revealed a path. Whenever he walked, they splitted. Sooner or later, he could see the castle gradually appear. The moment he saw it, he was very happy. When he walked through the gate, the enchanted soldiers were still motionless. He kept going through the grass. The horses were motionless too, like in 100-year sleep. He reached the tree line where the cave laid. The prince went into it, and he finally saw the beautiful sleeping princess. He froze for a moment before her beauty. He exclaimed,
You are so beautiful.
Like being hypnotized, the prince got close to the princess and gently put a kiss on her lips. As their lips touched, the princess awoke. She looked at the prince affectionately. Right after, the whole castle awoke as well. The birds sang melodically. Everything that was happening before the castle was cursed was continued. In the kitchen, the cook kept cutting the meat that was 100 years old, and the fire was lit again. The prince and the princess looked at each other and smiled. They walked to the middle of the palace, where the king and queen were waiting. So finally the prince came and saved the whole castle from the long slumber. Everybody was hand in hand and they danced and sang happily. Right after the wedding of the prince and the beautiful Princess Rose was held, they lived happily ever after.